The decade that was 1950s. What did the 1950s mean to you? In this decade, we explore the important events that shaped the years between 1950 and 1959. The world began the decade in recovery. Cities still bore scars from war, but people were ready to live again. Streets filled with laughter and the sound of bicycles instead of air raid sirens. Across Europe and America, new houses rose where rubble once stood. In Asia and Africa, independence stirred. The decade opened with hope, but also with the memory of loss still close enough to touch. In Korea, war broke out in 1950, and for 3 years, the peninsula became a battlefield of ideology. Millions were displaced, families torn apart, and towns reduced to ashes. When the guns finally fell silent, the border cut through a nation like a scar. The conflict reminded everyone that peace was never guaranteed. Back in Europe, people rebuilt piece by piece. The Marshall Plan poured money and materials into bombed-out cities. Rationing in Britain finally ended by 1954. The coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953 brought a sense of unity, a shared belief that better days might truly come. The Great Smog of London that same year darkened that optimism, killing thousands, and reminding everyone that progress came with cost. In the United States, the post-war boom remade life. Veterans bought homes in new suburbs and filled them with televisions, fridges, and cars that gleamed like chrome dreams. The interstate highways linked cities and families. The GI Bill opened doors to education and stability, even as segregation kept others locked out. McCarthyism haunted the air with fear of communism and blacklists. But under the surface, change was building. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus in 1955, and that single act of quiet defiance became a spark. The civil rights movement began to find its voice in churches and street marches. It was courage made ordinary. The decade became a rehearsal for justice that the 60s would bring to full volume. Elsewhere, human endurance took new forms. In 1953, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay stood on the roof of the world atop Mount Everest, their breath frozen, their triumph shared. They were proof that the world could still astonish. Scientists achieved miracles of their own. In 1953, Watson and Crick revealed the structure of DNA, unlocking the secret code of life. 2 years later, Jonas Salk's vaccine stopped polio from haunting summer playgrounds. The Cold War defined global fear. The United States and the Soviet Union built hydrogen bombs that could erase cities. School children practiced duck and cover drills beneath wooden desks. In 1956, Soviet tanks crushed the Hungarian Revolution, while in the same year, Britain, France, and Israel invaded Egypt during the Suez Crisis. The old empires were fading but still capable of dangerous gestures. The Iron Curtain split Europe down the middle, while propaganda filled radios on both sides. Japan rebuilt faster than anyone expected. Its factories produced the first small radios and cameras that would soon travel the world. In India, democracy took root under Nehru. In Ghana, independence arrived in 1957, and the drums of freedom echoed across Africa. Old powers learned that the map of the world was no longer theirs to draw. Life at home took on a new rhythm. Washing machines spun beside kitchen tables. Television sets glowed in darkened rooms as families gathered for variety shows, game shows, and the first news broadcasts from afar. The image replaced the headline. America laughed with "I Love Lucy." Britain tuned into The Goon Show. Walt Disney opened Disneyland in 1955, promising a future drawn in pastel colors and neat optimism. In music, the future arrived early. From Memphis came Elvis Presley, his voice shaking parents and thrilling teenagers. Rock and roll erupted through jukeboxes and car radios. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Buddy Holly played faster, louder, freer. Jazz reinvented itself through Miles Davis and John Coltrane, giving the night a cooler sound. Across the Atlantic, British kids picked up guitars inspired by skiffle and began to dream of their own bands. The beat would carry into the next decade and change everything. Cinema captured beauty and rebellion. Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, and Audrey Hepburn became faces of an age both glamorous and fragile. Films like Singin' in the Rain, Rebel Without a Cause, and Some Like It Hot told stories of freedom and frustration. The big screen offered escape while the small screen began to redefine daily life. Sport gave simple stories in a complicated time. Roger Bannister ran the first sub-4-minute mile in 1954, proving that limits are mostly habits. West Germany won the Football World Cup that same year, a moment of rebirth for a nation once broken. Rocky Marciano retired undefeated in the boxing ring. Baseball heroes like Jackie Robinson and Mickey Mantle turned stadiums into theaters of national pride. At the Melbourne Olympics in 1956, athletes competed while politics played outside the arena. But for those moments, sport still felt pure. Not everything was progress. Colonial wars raged in Algeria and Kenya. The Mau Mau uprising led to brutality and repression. The struggle for independence was rarely peaceful. In the United States, fear of nuclear war was constant. Civil defense drills showed children how to hide from the unhideable. Yet despite it all, people still planned holidays, still fell in love, still believed that tomorrow would come. Writers and thinkers began to question conformity. Beat poets read under dim light in smoky bars. Books like On the Road and Catcher in the Rye spoke to a restless generation that no longer trusted polite obedience. Teenagers became a cultural force of their own. Hula hoops spun in driveways, milkshakes clinked at diners' cars, idled under neon lights. The word cool meant more than temperature, it meant independence. Technology crept into daily life in quiet revolutions. Transistors replaced bulky tubes, making radios portable. Early computers filled rooms, but hinted at worlds to come. Scientists whispered about silicon and circuits, while engineers dreamed of space. When Sputnik orbited Earth in 1957, its beeping pulse echoed around the planet. It was just a small sphere, but it changed everything. The space race had begun. Faith and science walked side by side. Churches filled each Sunday while newspapers spoke of rockets and radiation. People wanted safety, but they also wanted wonder. Parents taught their children that the future might be bright or it might be blasted, yet both futures felt real. The contradiction did not crush them, it hardened their resolve to keep living normally, no matter what hung above. By the end of the decade, the world felt both smaller and faster. Jet travel connected continents in hours. Credit cards appeared. Color television peeked over the horizon. Teenagers held transistor radios to their ears as civil rights marches filled the streets. The 1950s had started in rubble and ended in rhythm. If the 1940s were about survival, the 1950s were about learning how to live again. The people who rebuilt the world wanted peace, but found energy instead. The decade gave us rock and roll DNA satellites and equality in motion. It left behind a world that would never again be content to stay still.